Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? Hope it's fantastic. Everything here is really good. And I got a package today I've been waiting for like a year for. If you don't know what's in this box, this is the first secret project number 1 from the Brandon Sanderson surprise Kickstarter, which came out last year. I think if you've been here for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm a Brandon Sanderson fan. At least, I'm a fan. I enjoy most of his work. I haven't read a lot of it. I did not so much enjoy A Way of Kings, so I haven't completely given myself over to the Stormlight Archive, but everything else I've read of his I've really enjoyed. So I got excited for this because the reason that I enjoy Brandon's writing is because it's accessible, meaning that it's not flowery, he doesn't have big prose, he doesn't use big words, he explains things very simply in terminology, and he also you can tell that in his head he has created an entire planet worth of people that do all kinds of things, but in his writing he doesn't throw all of that at you. So it's more or less, he will interject world bits as you need to know them, and if you don't need to know them, he kind of leaves it off. And I appreciate that when I'm reading something just for pleasure, right? I also appreciate the other type of writing, like the more Robert Jordan or the more I guess George Martin, where there's just, let's fully explore the setting before that we even have character interaction. And I go back and forth, but for some reason, reading Brandon's work, it's just really, it feels like I'm reading kind of a mainstream thriller, in a sense that it's just a nice, comfortable paced, page-turning book. And I'm not really getting punched in the face with fantasy stuff. Now, that being said, Brandon does have a lot of fantasy in his work. And this book in particular is, I don't want to say it's an exception, it's definitely not an exception. It is very fantastical, and that'll be part of my talk here. Got a pin, that's Vin from the Mistborn series. Got a little spoiler warning card. Got some interesting crinkle paper, and here's the king of the adventure is the book. This is Tress of the Emerald Sea, first edition, blah blah blah. Excited to own it. I have already read it because I backed the Kickstarter. I also backed the digital version, and so I finished this in a couple of days. It's a pretty small book by Brandon Sanderson's standard, and it reads very quickly because, like I said earlier, it's very simple language. I enjoyed the book, but not because it's a good book. I'm not saying it's a bad book, but it's exactly what I wanted. And what I wanted was a book from Brandon Sanderson that's not bound by a contract, that doesn't have presupposition involved. There's nothing in here. This is just a simple book that he wrote as a love letter to his wife. It's just like a book that she wanted to read. His wife said, "What if this?" And he goes, "I'm going to make that book." He did it without telling anybody about it, and he gave it to her. This is a gift to his wife. This isn't really, it was not intended for us to read. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to see what Brandon writes when there's not a publishing deal on the line, right? Like, what does a person who writes top-level fantasy write when he's just writing for the hell of it, for the fun of it? That's what this is. And I can tell you, it's a decent book. I think it has some flaws. And for me, the biggest flaw is the entire premise, the entire world. It's a little too far-fetched, which is, I've read his work where we fight wars on the tops of spires because crab-like creatures crawl beneath us and murder and what like. So I've read his, extremely fantasy-based stuff, but this is trying to be an Earth-like planet with Earth-like language and Earth-like creatures and Earth-like everything, but with this really weird magic system. So if you don't want spoilers, I'm going to stop there. If you do, or you should stop there. I'm not stopping. If you don't care about spoilers, I'll continue. The whole concept, the whole version, the whole essence of this book is that this planet does not have liquid oceans. It has basically oceans of sand. But it's not sand, it's spores. If you've read his White Sand, I feel like the magic is the same in a sense that there's these spores that are different colored, in this case emerald, the Tress of the Emerald Sea, and they have different magical properties. Now this planet happens to have 12 different types of, I think it's 12, maybe 15, whatever. It has X number of different types of spores. We get to encounter 3 or 4 of them in the book, so it's not like you're going to encounter all of these, and you have to remember them. But each of these spores does a particular thing. So the emerald spores cause growth, vines grow, and all of them are triggered by a catalyst that just happens to be water. And there is the part where I just kind of go, okay, it's a little too far-fetched. Weather systems on the planet seem to be either non-existent or they're so well defined that humanity can exist outside of those weather patterns, so we're not risking being rained on and exploded by, these spores. Because when they get wet, they're violently explosive growth. So say the emerald vine, the vine producing emerald spores, when you get them wet, they burst into giant, vines. So if you were to ingest some, you're gone. You're a goner. Others burst into violent air and death and whatever. So and so the whole idea is these oceans of these spores are, I forget the name for it, but air is coming up from the crust of the planet, which causes these spores to turn into a liquid-like substance, so you can sail on them. But sometimes the air stops flowing and the sea's still, and now you're just stuck on a sandbar in a ship. And there's pirates and whatever. So the book itself, I really enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the girl, Tress. I enjoyed her reason for leaving her home and her going on this pirate adventure. The sea, the part that holds me back for saying this is a great book is that the sea really has no impact on the story. Zero. It just could have been a girl going on a pirate adventure, a girl from an island where she wasn't allowed to leave. It doesn't necessarily have to be because society says she couldn't leave, but whatever, goes on a pirate adventure to rescue a man. Proceed, right? And it would have been a great story. But the sea, the spore thing, it's just kind of like, it's not great. It's just okay. It's fine. It reads a little bit more like a fairy tale than the rest of his work. That's the way I've looked at this the entire time, which I think is perfectly acceptable. I realize I'm saying bad things and then saying I'm fine with it because it's true. I don't think that the premise of the world is great, but the story's good, and the character is good, and all the characters are good. There's really interesting characters, and there's a really interesting premise in the story. The world is the part that I was just kind of whatever. Just throw that part away, and the rest of it's fine, right? The rest of it's pretty good. The rest of it, I could see myself reading this book to my kids if I had little kids. I don't see this reading to my 14-year-old, but if I had little kids, I could see reading this to them as a let's sit down and read a story together, and I think it would work really well. It's a very warm story. It's very cozy if you're into that sort of fantasy. There is some violence. There is no there is no predatory stuff or sexual stuff. There is violence. There is some death. And there is some, hard moral choices. But overall, I'd say it's a pretty cozy book to read. And I really, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it more because of what it is, not because of what's in the pages. Meaning that I really wanted a story written without the pretense of it being published initially. Like, this is what I'm going to write when I just want to write something for me. And that's what it is. And I think for that, it's fantastic. Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I'm not going to open it up and show you all the pretty pictures. I can't wait to see them, though, because on the Kindle, all the pictures, of course, are black and white and ugly. And, yeah. I want to experience those on my own. So, I'm excited for the next package. I think I have to wait 3 more months to get it. So there's 4 books in total we get to read from this set. This is book 1. What else have I been... I started reading... I don't know the name of the series. It's the... oh, God. Can I even tell you what it is? It's the Gormenghast or something like that series. It's a very bizarre and twisted... I discovered it on Reddit because somebody said that it is Lynchian, meaning David Lynchian. And Titus Groans is the name of the book. It is a Gormenghast novel. And I'm really excited to read that book. Its opening is extremely bizarre and extremely weird. And honestly, it probably had some heavy influence on the story that I wrote last Friday. But I'll probably talk about it when I'm done there. If there's other books you want me to talk about, let me know. And I will try to read them and talk about them. But if you want to read a cozy Brandon Sanderson fantasy story, Tress of the Emerald Sea is a good pickup. And it's just standalone. Like, you don't need to know anything about anything he's ever written. You can just go for this book. Good stuff. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is phoenix. It is a noun meaning a mythical bird about the size of an eagle but with brilliantly colored plumage that dies by fire and then is reborn from the ashes. One day, the phoenix appeared in the forests of France, and legend has it that all the other birds became instantly jealous. Phoenix, Phoenix. Of course, I know all about phoenixes because Fox is the best phoenix ever.